My name is Anna Mitchell, and today I'm going to be doing my teaching presentation. It is going to be on this amazing collection of poetry titled An American Sunrise by Joy Harjo. And more specifically, it is going to be about the Muskogee Native American tribe. So, this poetry collection is a journey that Harjo goes on as she visits the land of her ancestors for the first time. We go on to learn in this presentation that this land is really rightfully theirs and it was essentially stolen for them as they were forcibly asked to leave. These poems are filled with memories, they're filled with joy, pain, sadness, anger, beauty, and protest. And to begin, I really wanted to read this preface in the novel because some of the stuff that's stated in here, I will go on to say in my presentation, but it is like 2 paragraphs that are so eloquently written, and I just felt the need to share them. So it goes like this. It's just a little background into the situation. On May 28, 1830, President Andrew Jackson unlawfully signed the Indian Removal Act to force move southeastern peoples from their homelands to the west. We were rounded up with what we could carry. We were forced to leave behind houses, printing presses, stores, cattle, schools, pianos, ceremonial grounds, tribal towns, and churches. We witnessed immigrants walking into our homes with their guns, Bibles, household goods, and families, taking what had been ours, as we were surrounded by soldiers and driven away like livestock at gunpoint. There were many trails of tears of tribal nations all over North America, of indigenous peoples who were forcibly removed from their homelands by government forces. The indigenous people who are making their way up from the southern hemisphere are a continuation of the Trail of Tears. May we all find the way home. Harjo writes that so beautifully, so I wanted to include it. But now I'm going to get into the meat of some just historical information about this Muskogee tribe. So the first thing I want to talk about is the structure of their communities. The tribe lived in like a town city like structure with a central settlement and then surrounding villages. The surrounding villages consisted of other small tribes. They had a solid government, they had great land and good agriculture. In fact, they were known for making these flat top pyramids. It's believed that the reason why these tribes chose to band together was to protect each other from the larger tribes nearby. And I wanted to include this quote from the National Park Service website. It says, by the middle of the 18th century, the Muskogee Nation consisted of about 60 towns. I think that is super interesting, mainly because I feel like there's been a narrative painted that before white settlers got here, Native American tribes were uncivilized. And I think that is being corrected as time goes on. But right here, it shows that they were really thriving in the environments they created. You know, they had strong government, good land, great agriculture. And so I just feel like that throws that narrative out of the water that said Native Americans were uncivilized just because they did things differently than the white settlers. Now, to get into some cultural facts. Like many Native American tribes, women were the heads of the household. And because of that, they also owned all the houses and the land. And any inheritance or property was passed through the maternal line. The culture of the tribe was also very communal. There was like no individualism. Um, but something I thought was interesting was everyone belonged to a clan, which is different than a family because each person belonged to a clan through their mother. So the way I understand it is that although a man and a woman would get married and start a family, the man would still belong to his mother's clan and the woman to her mother's, which is very interesting with our Western minds because we think that when we get married, we remove ourselves from our family line in a way. You know, we are our own thing. And I think this emphasizes that communal culture, that they were still very a part of their family's line. The man still kept his maternal clan. Very interesting. The traditional clothes are made of woven plant materials or animal hides until I think about the 17th century, and then they started adopting some European fashions. And then their language, while it was distinct, it was Muskogean. It was also very similar to the Choctaw language, which I thought was interesting. And they even had several identical words in both languages. When settlers first found the Muskogee tribal people, they were in the valley of the Ocmulgee River, which is present day Georgia and Alabama. And something that's also interesting is when the English settlers arrived, they began calling the people Creeks. And so you might hear me use that word interchangeably. They're Muskogee tribe or Muskogee Creek tribe. And they did this because the tribes always lived near water, so lakes, ponds, rivers. Another thing I found interesting was the Indians traded a lot with the white settlers. Unfortunately, though, once settlers started to arrive in the Muskogee land, it wasn't long before they began to push for these Native American people to be removed. And there was immense pressure on the US government from the state and from these white settlers to remove the Native people. There were several wars leading up to the ultimate removal that I read about, but I didn't think they were necessary to include in this presentation, so I just thought I would address it at least. But the ultimate removal officially began after the 1836 Creek War. Several thousand people were actually forcibly moved to Montgomery, Alabama, and that was sort of a holding space for a while. And then near the end of 1836 into the beginning of 1837, the majority of the Muskogee tribe left for Oklahoma. And as we read in that preface, most of them only took what they could carry with them. So they were forced to leave a lot of things behind. I wanted to read one more quote from the National Park Service website because it was very eye-opening. It says, "The overall effect of the Muskogee Trail of Tears was staggering. 21,792 Muskogee Indians lived in Georgia and Alabama until 1832. 20 years after the removal ended, only 13,537 Muskogee remained in Oklahoma." I just thought that this quote was crazy because the number was essentially cut in half of their people. And just to provide some insight on the trail, it was a 3-month-long journey, and it spanned 800 miles on land and 400 miles in the water. I also wanted to give some insight into the Muskogee Creek Nation today. So today it is the third largest recognized tribe in the United States. They still reside in Oklahoma, and they have their own operating government there, which is similar to the US government. It has 3 branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. Now there are at least 16 ceremonial grounds established in the United States. And Native Americans are also granted certain benefits from the government, such as education or healthcare benefits. And also, according to the Muskogee Nation website, there are 97,000 citizens today in their tribe, which is quite phenomenal when you look at how many people were in their tribe when they arrived in Oklahoma. However, I think after reading all this information about the pain that we caused this tribe and then, where they are today, the question is still remaining: is that enough restitution? Yes, the Muskogee tribe has bounced back in a way. They now have their own land, the ability to govern it. But is that really restitution for having to leave their homes and everything they owned behind so many years ago? I believe that this question is one that is confronted in the novel, in the collection of poetry, and one that is on Harjo's mind as she is writing. However, even though I think it's present, it's kind of like hanging in the air, I'm not sure she really answers it. You see, in this collection, she writes poems of grief, poems of light, poems of pain, poems of remembrance. But more than anything, I think that Harjo's goal in this is to write poems of process. I think she is processing what was lost. I think she is processing the experience of her ancestors. Um, and even more specifically, I think she might be processing who she could have been had history been written differently, who Harjo would have been if her ancestors were not forced to leave their homes so many years ago. So I just want to read one, just a little excerpt from one of the poems that I think exemplifies this well. The poem is titled Washing My Mother's Body, and it is about just that. So I'm going to read the first paragraph. It says, I never got to wash my mother's body when she died. I returned to take care of her in memory. That's how I make peace when things are left undone. I go back and open the door. I step in to make my ritual, to do what should have been done, what needs to be fixed so that my spirit can move on, so that the children and grandchildren are not caught in a knot of regret they do not understand. And while obviously this poem is real and it's ceremonial for her, I can't help but wonder if a large part of it is symbolic. Um, I wonder if Harjo herself is almost the person that is caught in a knot of regret they do not understand. And I wonder if washing her mother's body is symbolic of rituals and experiences she did not get to have because her ancestors were forced to leave. However, if that's the case, I feel like now she is saying, I am stepping in and reclaiming what is rightfully mine so that my future grandchildren and children do not have to feel empty because they didn't get to experience it. I really think that is what this collection of poetry is about. It is about Harjo reclaiming for Native Americans now and for generations to come something that was rightfully theirs. And she's processing that throughout the whole thing. It is moving and inspiring, and I have enjoyed reading it so much and conducting this presentation. So thank you so much for listening. Bye.